Hey everyone, I am stealing Christy's thunder and welcoming all of you here today. Thank you for joining us. I'm stepping in just to moderate because today is very cool and honestly my favorite form of lives. I know Christy really enjoys it too. It's just plain Q&A, nothing fancy. We're just asking all of the most frequently asked questions that Christy gets from SMB clients. And I think this is super important for Christy specifically, because a lot of times our SMB community is afraid to ask because they feel like expensive consultants, kind of like lawyers, are going to bill you by the question, right? So having the ability to have this forum, ask your questions in real time is such a great opportunity. So with that, I'm Kyler Cheatham, and I am joined by Christy Barber with Christy Barber Consulting. So hi, Christy. Where are you joining us from today in the U.S.?
I am hanging out in Florida for a while because why not stay in humidity and go to the beach every day? Sounds great.
I know. Yeah, for those of you that don't know, Christy has just moved to the South in the United States, the Southeast, and she's just embraced like her Southern lifestyle. She's like loving the heat, and she left us up here in the West. But she's just loving it down there. So we're happy for her.
I know. I think I'm the only person that humidity doesn't bother me, and I like heat. Where everybody else is the opposite. They're like, "Oh my gosh, this is awful." I'm like, "Hey, I don't have to wear a jacket today. We're good."
I know. Humidity is like deeply confusing to me being from Colorado. I'm a Colorado mountain child through and through. And so when I get in humidity, even when it's cold, I'm like, why is the air wet? Like, can we breathe? Can we not breathe? It's kind of crazy. But I'm excited for everyone to be able to kind of join in on this conversation. What Christy and I did and team is pulled all of her most frequently asked questions from all of her content, blogs, YouTube videos, TikTok videos. She's kind of TikTok famous, so definitely go follow her on there if you don't. Instagram, and just kind of piled them up, and we can ask her here in real time. The other thing that we really want to feature is your questions, right? This is an opportunity for you to come in, provide questions, and provide insight. And it really is just a great service to the SMB community to have access to information like this in an industry that can be very red tape, very siloed, very expensive, and intimidating. So it's a great opportunity to kind of answer those questions. So to kind of test that feature, I'll just ask you to drop where you're joining from today in the comments, and we can kind of get a little bit of a lens of our global audience. So let's start off, Christy, with one of our most frequently asked questions, which is kind of about adoption. So what are some really non-negotiables a business needs to have in place before they start looking at a new software, and maybe even focusing on what do some SMBs absolutely 100% need to have in place before they even consider looking at a new software?
Couple of things come to mind that I always hear a lot is that, but I know the biggest thing is, what is the outcome? What are you hoping to achieve by putting a new software into place? Because if you don't know what your end goal is, you don't know where you want to go, or even what you want a new system to do, then nothing you bring in is going to work for you. It could just be, hey, I hate the system I have today. And you're like, okay, that's great.
Nice.
What do you hope to achieve? Is it better reporting? Is it a clear understanding of what your inventory is? Is it having better roles and clarity in what people can and can't do in your solution? And that's going to be one of the main things to have. I think secondly, it would be, is everybody bought into this? Are the leaders understanding that, hey, we're going to need to go with a new solution? We're on board with it? Or is it one person trying to push through everybody saying, okay, we're going this way, whether you want to come or not? And we all know that when you don't have the adoption in place, you get the toxic water holes and everybody starts chit-chatting, and it just sets you up for failure.
Especially in
SMBs. Yeah. And you see it, I know, even on the experience you've had with larger industries as well, and some from mine too. And the other thing I would say is, if you don't have clear processes that are documented, that is something you need to have in place, even if they're messy, even if they are little to non-existent. You need to have those in place, because if you get a new solution, the way you set it up may not be in alignment with how you want to do your, or not do your work, but have your company function. And
Mhm.
that's why processes are so important. And I always tell everybody, make sure you have those from day one, because
Mhm.
the day you're going to really need them is day two.
Mhm. Yeah, and they're one of those things it's not fun to do. Like, let's just be honest. It's not the most fun to, map your processes, especially if you don't know how to do it. And a lot of
Mhm.
times with SMBs, they're kind of, a lot of people wear a lot of hats, and there's not a clear, like, you own this process, you own this process type of thing. And there's lots of crossover. So understanding that is so important, not only for a systems, like Christy said, but also just for your overall community to have things like understanding and empathy. There's so many
Mhm.
times we sit in workshops and we're like, "Oh, you do that? Like that's the process you go through? I had no idea. No wonder you're mad when I come over here with a
Yeah.
half-completed spreadsheet." And they truly had no idea that's how, their counterpart or peer was working in the organization. So I think
Mhm.
that's such a good piece of that. And I mean, adding to that, Christy, who should help you identify what your outcomes should be? Should that be a vendor? Should that be a VC? If you're doing funding, like who should that be?
I think it depends how your company's structured. If you're a small business, you and your leadership should have a clear idea of where you want to go, who you want to be. And then the vendor, when you choose that software, they're going to help bring that to life. It's kind of like you've put the bones in place and they're going to make it a person or whatnot. And I think that's important. You don't want to have vendors driving the direction of where you should go. And if you're on the VC side, I think it can get complicated in a lot of ways, because the VC is a lot of times the ones providing the funds and leading the way on this, but they still need to have an overall
Mhm.
understanding with how the organization is working, so they're not bringing in a solution that's not going to work.
Mhm. Absolutely. If you don't know who you are as someone who's leading the business and what you want to see out of this new technology, you might as well go throw your money off the roof, because
Yeah.
it's never going to produce what you want it to produce, because you don't even know what you want. And that's a big thing of getting SMBs to focus. And that's why, Christy's specialty is around not only SMBs, but family owned businesses that have gone generation from generation, continuing to grow, that are huge and massive, but still understanding what are your goals are so important. And I think
It
that goes
is.
along. Go ahead.
I was going to add one other thing on there too, is just along the lines of the defined roles. A lot of times when you're on older software or you're just starting up in your business, it's that I wear all hats.
Mhm.
And when you do move towards new software, those roles start coming into play and you don't have access to everything in the solution anymore.
Mhm.
And that is something that I think is really important in your buy-in phase of things, is getting everybody prepared for what that should be, and going back to having that empathy of, I know you used to be able to see this, and here's the reasonings why this is
Mhm.
going
Mhm.
into place, is having those checks and balances. I actually had a conversation with a client 2 weeks ago of just helping them understand checks and balances and why
Mhm.
things were the way they were, because on their old system everybody could just go in and do whatever they wanted. I'm like,
Mhm.
do you realize, Lucy over here, she could just write a check and
Mhm.
you would never even know. And when you
Exactly.
start putting more real life examples to them, all of a sudden you see the client be like, okay, yep, I understand now why we need to
Mhm.
have the roles in place. And even
Mhm.
though it sucks and it's uncomfortable, they'll get used to it.
Absolutely. And I think you hit on something that's so critical there, is that communication,
Yeah.
right? Defining those roles as a leadership team, even the user access and understanding what levels who's going to have which, mapping that out in your organizational assessment prior to looking at the implementation is going to make sure that everyone's comfortable and moving in the same direction, so you can have those conversations. Because I think a lot of that resistance comes from surprise, right? When
Mm-hmm.
the didn't know they weren't going to have access to these types of things. And all of a sudden it feels like it was secret or deceitful, and nothing good comes from that, right?
No, not at all. You need that transparency all along the lines from the beginning till the end. And I really applaud companies that can do that, where from day one, they're very open of, hey, here's what we're experiencing at the top level of things that you may not be aware of, and why we want to go down this route to get a new system or whatever we're going to get, as opposed to other companies that, yeah, they kind of make it secret. And all of a sudden, well, this is the direction we're moving. Good luck. And I even think about that from jobs that I had in the beginning, career, like high school and college. Of I worked at an accounting firm, and one day they're like, well, you're not doing this anymore, you're doing this, and wouldn't tell me why. And you kind of think of, well, one, I either did something wrong, you don't think I'm smart enough, it's easy to go the bad route on all of it. But instead, they should have been, you're qualified now to go do this over here, and I want you to be in charge of this and help make you even better at your job. And that's where the communication and transparency comes in, and along the lines with the adoption too. Be very, very clear with your teams of what you want, what you hope to get, and get their feedback too.
Absolutely. And that's so critical. I think that goes along with this question over here. And I think you're driving here on the side, but I'm going to go mixed question. What's the most common mistake that SMBs make when selecting a new tech tool?
I think a lot of time I always say it's chasing the shiny object syndrome of, oh, I want all of these things because they sound great, but I don't really need them. I think that is the biggest thing. And then they end up spending more money than they need to. Another mistake is letting vendors drive 100% of what you need, and not hearing you and your goals of what your organization needs. That's when I see a lot. And then there's scope creep. There's buying, like I said, additional modules that you need or don't need. And then there's also, I think another mistake could be is overselling maybe the next package of the solution, instead of looking at what you have today and saying, hey, actually, this is a really good base, but let's just API in a couple of these other things, and this is going to last for another 5 years or so. And helping really evaluate what you need, instead of just going out there and buying and ripping apart your whole infrastructure.
Absolutely. And that comes from some discipline around requirements gathering. And I think that's a lot what Christy comes in and helps you do, because a lot of times SMBs, especially leaders or founders and SMBs, think they have to know everything because they have to answer all of these questions. When it comes to new technology, admitting that you don't know is much less expensive than pretending like you do for a long time and then being like, I can't monitor all this. You go to the vendor's job is to sell your software. That's their job, not because they're evil or they hate you. That is their job, right? So having someone that's not there dedicated to your goals, while the vendor is saying, well, you're going to need the accounting module, and you're going to need the finance module, and you're going to need blah, blah, blah. You don't know if that's actually true, or it's just hitting the salesperson's quotas. So it's so critical to have someone like Christy in the room that's dedicated to only your goals and can help you decide like what is the best, because sometimes she sees businesses and she says, you don't need new technology, right? You're a hot mess. You need a lot of other things, but new technology is not going to help you right now. We need to get there, right? We need to get the foundations in place, the good behaviors in place before we can get to a step where we're being more digital focused. And a lot of that comes from that shiny object syndrome. A lot of times we're like, oh, we got this marketing message, AI makes you more efficient. AI can cut headcount, can save you costs, can save from virtual assistants to, supply chain automation. There's all of this noise in the marketplace. And yeah, that's super cool. What a time to be alive, right? But also, it's going to lack focus and clarity and not work if you don't have the data and the operators around it. There's a foundational piece you need in there, right?
There is. Yeah, that's such a big part of it. Yeah, I agree. And I think going back to your point about requirements, and that's what's so important, of knowing and understanding what your processes are, what you need versus what you want. because there's always the, oh, this would be nice to, or, you're nice to have, this would be great, but I don't really need it. I need this over here. And so understanding those and then shopping for a system, and even going back to a client I'm currently working with who is on Great Plains, and they automatically thought, well, we have to go to Business Central because, everybody's offloading and
That's
going
what
on to that.
Microsoft told us.
Yeah, it's what Microsoft told us. And after going through and evaluating, I'm like, QuickBooks is all you need.
Yeah.
They're not complex. Great Plains was oversold to them years and years ago, and it's complex, and they don't need any of that functionality. QuickBooks does all of it because they're a service-based company. And so moving that down, and now they're saving a lot, probably $8,000-9,000 a month just by going to a different solution.
Yeah, absolutely. And definitely probably more flexible and can meet their needs a little bit better. Absolutely. And
learning curve too.
And that's how you tell that Christy doesn't sell software, because she'd be absolutely nuts to say, let me take, a software that's costing you thousands of dollars a month and bring you to something that is way less. That's what's best for the business. And that's most certainly what she does. That's why she has a reputation like this in the marketplace. So let's talk about implementation timelines. So this is a question I get all the time. I know it's something you get all the time in the industry. People want to know how long their implementation should take. So how long in an SMB community should an implementation take?
Again, it's going to depend on complexity. I've done implementations for small businesses, been a part of them, that we've done it in 3 months, and it was grueling and a lot of work, but it was doable because they had good data. And that is one of the key factors. If your data is not clean, it's messy and all that, that is usually one of the big hurdles into getting a implementation that flows a little bit faster. But I would say on average, you usually see 6 to 9 months, sometimes 12, if you're really complex and you're bringing things in. And you're also looking at, can your team handle doing an implementation plus all their daily work? Do you have the bandwidth to do it? Do you need to bring extra people in? Do you have to pay the vendor more money to make up for the headcount that you might not have? The other thing is that you may want to look at, of just making sure that you stay within like that 3 to 6 month part, is making sure you're very clear on what your scope is. As soon as there's scope creep, the weeks and the months just keep getting pushed out, and you don't want that. And that's why when you know your processes ahead of time, you know your goals ahead of time of what you need and what you want, then that helps keep you within scope, and you're not trying to add something else later on. I mean, that always does happen sometimes, where you see something, you're like, oh, you know what? I wasn't planning to pay for this. I thought it'd be phase 2, but you know what? I see I really need it. Yep, let's go ahead and do it. There's always going to be those types of things, but usually the timelines, you can keep them pretty tight if you have the bandwidth of your team, your data is clean and in order, and there's a good communication plan of where you're headed.
Absolutely. I love that. That is a great way to look at it. And also kind of understanding, again, you don't know what you don't know. Implementations, some of the most seasoned implementation specialists I know have done, 50 in their lifetime, right? It takes a long time. Might be a few more for our SMBs, especially now that we're going more module based. But when we're looking at things like an ERP system, that takes a long time, and it's less about the go live date is totally made up, right? Until you get to the point of testing and understanding what that looks like. Having someone at your side that can be like, yeah, this can wait till phase 2, but we cannot ignore it. We must implement it. But there are other things where you're like, okay, well, that's not a need to have. That's not in our core requirements. So let's not let it bog down our timeline. Let's go live and then continue to work through that afterwards. And having that understanding is so, so difficult if you don't have someone that's been through it before.
And I think to add to it also, all systems are complex in their own ways, because you can even look at QuickBooks. Yes, you can get QuickBooks ready to go in an hour, basically. A lot of times you can
Mhm.
do a lot of that. But even with this client I'm working with right now, we're on month 3.5 of getting QuickBooks really set up and the infrastructure things
Mhm.
plugged into it. And it's
Mhm.
going to be another month before it's ready to go, because we're
Mhm.
bringing in,
Mhm.
different API systems to track data points.
Mhm.
And I think
Mhm.
there's sometimes this misunderstanding that, well, QuickBooks should be done in a week. It's QuickBooks, people should know how to use it. But again, it's a data thing. And with this, there was a lot of data cleansing that needed to happen. And that took about a month and a half on its own just to cleanse the data. And now it's getting things in the right
Yeah.
places and fixing accounting functionality as well.
Absolutely. And QuickBooks is
It is.
sophisticated if depending on what you buy, right? And there's a whole industry around QuickBooks integrations and plugins and things like that that can make your QuickBooks what you want it, as long as you have the bandwidth to manage all of those APIs
Yeah.
and things like that. So let's go to one of these questions here from LinkedIn, which is, how can startups tell when it's time to move beyond spreadsheets and duct tape? And I love that question, because right now we have a ton of startups, right? And I know you've worked with anything from startups to 100-year-old family-owned business. So you've really seen like the full breadth of what that can really look like. And what is that key point, even if you're not a startup, you're an established business, that you see as the catalyst of, you got to get a system in place, man? Like, you've got spreadsheets, you've got all kinds of weird stuff going on here. You need a core system. What are some of the kind of key components there?
One of the big things I see is it's the manual entry. You're putting it in a spreadsheet. You're also putting it somewhere else. You're relying on spreadsheets with complex formulas to do something. And as soon as a formula breaks, you don't know, hey, is this right? Is this wrong? Did somebody change it? That's a big part of it. You have teams that are managing multiple spreadsheets that don't talk to each other. You've kind of built a homemade ERP system just with spreadsheets.
Mhm.
But the biggest thing for me always is, with the spreadsheets, one, can I trust the data in there? Because it's so easy to change. There's no audit trails, things like that. The formulas break, they always do, and you just have to always make sure that that's up and running again. But there's no clear way to really get a good picture of what's going on real time. And that a lot of times is when a small business is, hey, you know what, I need something different. I know a lot of companies use spreadsheets to manage inventory, and that's fine, because you can, on a daily or monthly, you're going in there, you're adjusting things and doing things like that. But you'll finally get to the point where that inventory management on a spreadsheet is really difficult. Things are moving too quickly. You can't keep up with it, and then it gets neglected. Then hey, I can't. I got to bring in some type of inventory module to handle how everything's moving around, and stop, putting some more tape on it. We got to make it work just a little bit longer. And I see that a lot with small businesses, just because of cost. Putting the duct tape on it is, okay, well, I'll buy myself another 6 months or so, because I may not have the cash flow to put into something, or I don't have the bandwidth right now, or whatever that looks like. I think it's good to have an understanding of what is that make it or break it point for your own business, that, hey, I can't keep putting duct tape on it any longer, because I can't even see what the original document was, because there's so much on there. And then knowing from there, okay, we really need to seriously think about moving to an actual system and get away from those spreadsheets.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And having, again, someone to come in and assess. And I know it sounds like I'm trying to like sell you, Christy. I'm not. Whoever you want, all that I want you to do is not waste a ton of time and energy and suck the life out of your culture trying to figure out what the next step is. Just look for someone, especially someone that's independent, that has experience in this, to make sure they come in and assess. And they can either say, hey man, like, yeah, it's time. Like, these spreadsheets are hanging on by a thread over here. And all of your financial information is on someone's computer, and that's really dangerous, right? To be able to do that. So you need to figure out how you're going to make that more secure, and here are your options. And when it comes to cost, that's a huge consideration, especially for your first big software purchase. We were doing a selection. We looked at licenses the other day for one of our bigger companies. Christy, if we have a SMB client for my firm, we call Christy immediately. That's just how that works because she's a specialist in the field. But for a bigger client, we had a discrepancy in over $2 million in licensing costs. For that type of business, still significant, but not that big a deal. For an SMB, that's
Huge,
make or
yeah.
break, man. Yeah. So I think looking at that cost, so maybe let's dig into that a little bit. I know you get a ton of questions about
Yeah.
costs because now there's like kind of this rise of new vendors coming into the space that are lower cost, that are targeting SMBs, but they might not be as well established when it comes to the support that they're needed. So how do you really balance understanding what is cheap and kind of what you get what you pay for type of thing?
Yeah, I think it goes back to kind of what you said, that assessment in the beginning of assessing the small business, seeing what they need and all these things, and then understanding what we documented as far as requirements of what you need to have. And then it's evaluating some of these low cost solutions and having them give a demo of what they can do, asking them those hard questions. If I was to do this, could your solution do X? Like a good example of that is, it happened to me a couple weeks ago, is there's a solution that will bring in all of your data from Shopify, TikTok. When you're an e-commerce company, it drops it into QuickBooks. And the client started a new payment gateway. So meaning they're taking PayPal payments, TikTok payments, all of these things, and it flows into Shopify. It didn't notify us that there was a new marketplace of payment channels coming through. And it just started putting all of the items into Shopify. And it's like, okay, well, this is a low cost. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's asking them that question of, okay, there's another company over here that is, maybe they're 2 times the amount, but they have that stop point in place of saying, we're going to notify you. We noticed you have a new payment gateway.
Yeah.
We want to tell you, you need to go in and map out where they should go, or tell us where they should go. Not that us just assuming it should go to this account. And now for me on the accounting side of things, I'm having to go clean it out and put it to where it should go and back things out because it didn't notify us. So those are little things that you can ask when you're demoing those solutions and saying, okay, maybe this $50 a month solution is great because it's going to do everything I need it to do. But then I know once I get to a certain point, I will outgrow this, and I need to have, the kind of the next best in place for that.
Absolutely. And I think that is so, so critical to really understand that cost feature. And I don't know about you, Christy, but I see that a lot with the movement to SaaS, right? There's so many sneaky costs in that contract. And when you are an SMB and you don't have, that ability to just say, oh, it's a bummer. I didn't know we were going to spend an extra 50 grand in licensing, but we did, and we signed the contract and we didn't understand it. If you don't have someone to review that contract, even outside of your internal counsel, say you're a $500 million business, you have an internal counsel that kind of oversees things. SaaS agreements are very, very niche and very, very tricky. So you need to understand what that license is going to cost you in the second year, because they love to say, for the first year, you get X amount for free. And then all of a sudden they get you on that second year because you signed a 5-year contract and you can't get out of that type of thing. So it's one of those things that you really need to understand that total cost of ownership from the get-go before you even consider implementing it, because it could potentially, take your business down. That's a very serious thing for the SMB.
It is. And I actually met with a lady a couple weeks ago that was buying a new software, small business. They only need about 4 user licenses, but it was that same thing of, she sent me her contract. She's like, I think there's things hidden in here. Here's what I found, but based on experience. And again, I'm not a lawyer. I can't tell you yes or no. But there are things that I start seeing that are trends that
Mhm.
pop up in all of these that I can inform the user about. And then she can go
Mhm.
to the vendor, or I will go to the vendor with her, and then she can seek legal counsel. But there were a handful of things in there, and we ended up negotiating even further on those things. So it was a more win-win for both parties and not so one-sided in the vendor's favor. And again, the vendors aren't doing this to, be evil or anything like that. It's just they're doing business. And a lot of times if you don't know what to look for, you don't even know what to ask them to change. And so that was a good
Mhm.
part of it, of just making sure that she was really covered on all angles, because SaaS is
Mhm.
complex and there's hidden words in there. There's all kinds of hidden things, especially with disaster recovery. How long will it be if the system goes down that you can get me back up and running, and things
Mhm.
like that. And I know nowadays there's different insurance you have to cover around having cloud-based solutions with the disaster recovery. And do you have those in place? So I think for small businesses, that's really key. And that's something that I help all of my clients with, is
Mhm.
making sure that you understand what's going on, but then also understanding too that you need to get legal counsel that understands this way better than I do. It's out of
Mhm.
my
Yeah.
price range of knowledge, but having that so that you're not tricked on month 2 of it, or year 2 or year 5.
Absolutely. And that piece of it, I think, is in your network. And that's the nice part about it, is it's not just any, lawyer off the street knows how to read SaaS agreements. Just
No,
like
they
not
don't.
and it's not something, even internal counsel, like for the bigger clients I support, they externalize that process because it is a specialty. It's a specialty skill. So even people that have, a floor of lawyers in their skyscraper, right, still seek that expertise to understand, like, what does this actually look like? So
Mhm.
definitely something that's so critical. I'm going to go to another question from the audience. Thank you for all of these great questions. These are amazing. We'll go back in and answer these. If you're watching this in the replay or anything like that, we always keep an eye on the comments. We'll go back in and answer those too. I like this one here at the bottom. I'm making you work for this, Christy. How should small businesses go about keeping their data clean from day one? And maybe even just talking about how do they even be cognizant of how they house their data, store their data, organize their data from day one, because it can be a free for all, right?
Oh my gosh, yeah. It can be really messy. I think what's important is to making sure it's clean from day one, is having a process.
Mhm.
So a good example would be with a client I'm working at, when they receive deposits in, how are they matching those up? How are
Mhm.
they putting them into QuickBooks? How are they, whatever that looks like? And they didn't have a very clear process. So things are
Mhm.
getting entered in multiple ways. And we had to go back and put that in. Hey, you can decide if you want to put the check image in QuickBooks. You can also keep it in like a share file or OneDrive file as well. And the other thing for them too is just looking at accounts payable. There wasn't a clear process of how it was done. Some people were printing checks. Some were, hey, if they came in that day, they were wiring the money. What does that look like, and how do we make it consistent? So if you were to be out of the office that day, the other person is going to do it the same way, and we're not going to get
Mhm.
discrepancies in how the data is input. That's a
Mhm.
big thing. And I think also from day one, if you go to the inventory side of things, making sure you have a SKU set up the way you want it. I've seen people that change their SKUs as time goes by, and then there's different naming conventions along the way. And then they end up going back and having to clean up other ones to make them go to the new side. And so those are really good things to think of ahead of time, of just,
Mhm.
how do I want my data to look to me? And
Mhm.
especially with AI in place and utilizing data with AI to give you outputs, garbage in is garbage out. And if your data
Mhm.
isn't clean from day one, your AI tool cannot help you yet. Maybe one day it will go back in and say, hey, you know what? All of these things are wrong. Let us go clean it for you. But today, that's not possible yet.
Absolutely. And I think that's a big piece, is like, own what you don't know, right?
Yeah.
Nobody knows in a small to medium sized business. As a founder myself, that, is the classic visionary, not the process CEO, right? You have to own, like, hey, I have zero idea how to do this. I know, essentially what we're looking for from the output. Bring someone in that can help you set up that foundation correctly, so that when you see a shiny new object at CES or something like that, or someone on stage that's using business intelligence in this very cool way, or Copilot or something like that, remember that the data is the gas that fuels the car, right? You could buy, the most beautiful car in the world. If you do not have gas, typically, to run it, right, you can't drive it. So it just sits in the driveway unused. And that's a big thing about this, is I think SMBs should a lot of times not try and be everything to everyone from a product standpoint, but also from an internal operation standpoint. There's things that you just need help to set up. Do you need help forever? No, but you need help to build the foundation of that. Just like you need help maybe from an outside HR agent to say, hey, this is how I would recommend you structure your team. This is how you do salaries and benefits and things like that. It's the same when it comes to technology.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, let's do one more here, and then we can kind of wrap up this Q&A. If you guys liked this, let us know, and we can do it on a weekly basis. Christy, is there one that's standing out to you that you want to answer as one of our last couple here?
Let's look. There's a lot of really good ones. I like this one right here of, what are some ways leaders unintentionally create bottlenecks in the change initiatives? I see this a lot, and a lot of times it is they're aligned in the beginning, and then some type of fear creeps in, or somebody from outside whispers in their ear of, oh, I can't believe you're doing this. This was a terrible experience for us. And then they start putting resistance in place of, well, I don't know if this is right. They just start questioning everything. The other thing is too, if leaders are not clearly communicating to their team, they can start getting resistance with their team up to them. And then all of a sudden they're siding with the team because the team is resisting so hard. And now they're creating this bottleneck in changing anything because, hey, you know what? My team is not going to be satisfied. And you know what? I don't have the bandwidth right now to try to convert them and make them think it's going to be great. So yeah, this is not good anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or you've been your implementation for 18 months and somebody gets that dreaded, why are we doing this again?
Question. I know. It's been going on. What is the meme that's out there? It's from Titanic. She's like, it's been 89 years or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it starts to feel like that. Everyone starts, especially in a small business, because you don't have, a completely outsourced implementation team that's coming to take your day job so that your core team can implement this big system, right? They're likely doing 2 jobs, or they're working a little bit harder, which you need to realize as a leader and you need to be aware of to measure burnout. But that piece will absolutely be a part of the conversation. And I think a lot of times, especially SMB leaders, need to learn how to listen and get out of the way. They've been so used to being everything to everyone, and that transition of being like, okay, I'm supporting this team. I'm here to serve what they need and get them what they need, as opposed to, I am shoving this technology down their throat with even well-intentioned initiatives of like, we got to be the next, AI, this and this and this. It's like, okay, well, no, you need to listen to what your problems are as an organization, continue to teach that culture over technology any day of the week.
Any day. Yeah. And I think that goes with clear vision too. If the leader doesn't have clear vision of where you're headed in this digital transformation or any type of change within the organization, then it's going to create confusion for your employees. It's going to create resistance. It's also going to cause you to miss maybe targets that you have along the way of deadlines that you need to meet, because nobody is clear on where they're going. And so you're kind of at a standstill until you have that clarity. And I've seen that pop up a time or two just because, if things get busy or whatnot, or there was no clear goal in the beginning when they started out with this change initiative to even know where they wanted to go. They just knew they needed to go somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And that is 100% true. And that they needed to go somewhere is the antithesis of this overall conversation.
Mm-hmm.
You got to figure out where you're going to go, and you got to figure that out before any sort of technology implementation, or it's going to cost you a lot of heartache for your team, a lot of time, a lot of turnover, a lot of money. And that's what we're trying to avoid here, right? It's never going to be perfect. A technology implementation is messy. It always is. But if you go in with that mindset, if you have the support and help you need, and you understand what this means for your organization, and you're honest with them, that's going to set you up for, to achieve as much success as you possibly can.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Well, this has been an awesome session, Christy. Thank you so much for letting us ask you questions. How can people get in touch with you if they want to kind of continue to ask you questions, or maybe they just want to pop in with their own specific scenario from their company?
Yeah, feel free to email me, Christy@ChristyBarber.com. You can also message me on any of my social channels with LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, all of those. Feel free to reach out. But yeah, I would love to answer any questions that you have. And if it's something that you're looking to do, like getting an assessment, or maybe you've already gone down the route of changing some things in the organization and it's not going right, and you just need somebody to kind of help move it along or give you clarity of like, yes, you're in the right place, happy to do that. So please, reach out, and I would be glad to speak with you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. And if you guys like this format, definitely let us know so that we can, continue to do this more often. But I think this is totally invaluable, especially to the SMB community that doesn't always get a ton of opportunity to ask in an unbiased type of area. So with that, Christy, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you to the audience. Be sure that you follow Christy on all of her social media platforms. I think they're linked down here in the description, so you're able to go check out. This will be on YouTube, and then it will be on YouTube Shorts videos. That is always nice to be able to send to your team, because say maybe the cost thing was relevant, but the implementation timeline wasn't. It helps to be able to have those kind of snippet opportunities to share that content. We also really appreciate, I know Christy appreciates when you like and subscribe. It really helps us to get this to more of the SMB community. So we appreciate you doing that. And I think you'll see them next week, Christy?
Yep.
Yep. Okay, cool. Well, we'll see you then. Awesome.
All right.